So today I'm going to be testing the new NZXT H5 Elite case. So I'm mainly going to focus on the GPU temps. I'm going to be testing a Founders Edition 3080. I'm going to be running some stress tests, some benchmarks, and do some gaming, just to see what kind of temps you should expect in this new case. I'm going to be using the NZXT X53 Kraken cooler. It's going to be cooling my i9-12900K. I tested that CPU with that same cooler in the old NZXT 510 case. It did fine, so I'm not really concerned about the CPU temps. I know the cooler is gonna handle it, no problem. It's gonna be sicko mode. All right, there's a knife on that. Could have killed me. A couple differences that I noticed when I was building compared to the 510 case that I used to have. You only get one 3.5-inch bay for mechanical drives now. On the old 510 you had two. It's not really a big deal nowadays. A lot of people are moving from mechanical drives. I personally like to have more bays. My Corsair case has 6 bays. I'm only using 2. It's just a nice to have. It's not necessary. It's not really a deal breaker, but you only have one now. You also only have one spot for a 2.5-inch SSD. A lot of people are using NVMe drives anyway that connect directly onto the motherboard, so it's not a big deal. So what took place of those 3.5-inch drive bays is this new fan. It's placed right under the GPU so that it can cool the GPU a little better. I'm interested to see how the GPU temps are. Not only does this case have a fan to blow directly in your GPU to give you better cooling, it also allows you to mount the radiator at the top, which is the way I prefer to build my computer. I'm not a big fan of having the radiator in the front because it blows the hot air coming off the radiator back into the case. So I'd rather the hot air from the radiator blow up and out, which is a better way to cool the case. Because before you only had room for one fan at the top, which honestly is no bueno. Temperature in this room now is 70.7 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 21.5 degrees Celsius. First test I'm doing is the Furmark stress test. I'm actually stress testing both the GPU and the CPU at the same time, which in a real world scenario, you're probably not using 100% of the GPU and the CPU at the same exact time. I just want to generate the most amount of heat I can in the case to see how it performs. Then I'll just do a stress test on the GPU just to see what temps I get when I'm only doing the GPU at 100%. Like I said, the CPU, I'm not super concerned about it. I will record the temp, but I'm not expecting to burn the house down with the cooler I have. The CPU temp is going to depend a lot on the cooler that you're using. And the cooler that we're using, I've already tested it. It's proven that it's sufficient for this processor. Hold on. Then gotta lubricate the mouth. So after 10 minutes of running the Furmark stress test on both the CPU and the GPU at the same exact time, the max temp I saw on the 3080 was 72 degrees Celsius, which is pretty good, especially if you're putting 100% load for that long at once. Usually when you're gaming, you're not at 100% load constantly. You'll see spikes in the usage while you're gaming. You may get higher temps at times, but you're usually not doing 100% the entire time. So 72 degrees is pretty good. The max temp on that GPU is 93 degrees Celsius, so you're about 21 degrees below that. Once you start hitting the upper 80s on the GPU temp, then that's kind of a concern. Then you'll either want to get better fans, maybe upgrade your case with a case with better airflow. The next stress test I did was still using Furmark. I only did a GPU stress test. So after running the GPU stress test for 20 minutes, the max temp I saw was 72 degrees as well, which tells me running the CPU at 100% load doesn't really have an effect on the GPU. That means the cooler's doing its job. Now, when I was running the GPU and the CPU test, I did see the temp on the CPU go to 92 degrees Celsius, which isn't the greatest. Like I said, you're typically not running 100% on both the CPU and GPU. If you're gaming, the CPU isn't doing most of the workload, it's the GPU. So you probably won't see those temps while gaming anyway. So if you're doing video editing, 3D modeling, anything that requires the CPU to work hard, you may want to upgrade to a triple fan radiator versus a dual fan. For gaming, I've already tested it. The dual fan radiator is perfect, so it's not really a big deal in this case. So I did run a user benchmark test just to see if I'm getting the right scores I should be getting. I just want to make sure that my components are not experiencing thermal throttle and giving me worse scores than I should be scoring. So if I'm comparing the scores that I got, so I got 238% in gaming, which it says that I should have got 232. So what does this mean? It just means that the components are not thermal throttling. I'm getting better scores than what they said I should be getting, so that's good. I didn't think heat was going to be an issue. It's a very short test. Doesn't generate much heat. Moving on. So I'm gonna run the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark test. I'll let you know what the temps are, what I scored. Oh, and there it's done. Frames rendered was 33,275, so my average FPS was 209, which is more than enough if you're doing 1440p at 144 hertz. You will be able to utilize the full potential of the monitor. As far as temp goes, so during this benchmark, the GPU was being utilized 100%. The max temp I saw during this benchmark was 74 degrees Celsius, which isn't bad. Max temp on the CPU was 62 degrees Celsius. I did run a 3D Mark test. I did the Firestrike Extreme benchmark test. Now I did do the same test in the old H510 case, and I did get better results in this case. Now I'm using the same exact components, same motherboard, same amount of RAM, same processor, same GPU. Now my max temp while I was running this test was 74 degrees Celsius. The score I got today is 20,453 versus the score I previously got in the old 510 case, which was 19,828. I tried to recreate the same exact scenario that I used on the old case versus this case, so maybe the case is affecting it. So far, if you're just looking at the scores, I'm getting better scores in this case. It is what it is. Take it how you want. That's just what the scores I got. Okie dokie. So I was running the Cyberpunk benchmark test that's built in. I averaged 61.58 frames per second. That's not super great. Yeah, and max temp I saw was 70 degrees Celsius, so not a bad temp. So I gamed on it for about 30 minutes. So my GPU temp never reached above 72 degrees Celsius, which is very good. What do I think about this case? I do think they improved this case over the old H510 and the H510 Elite cases. I think the airflow has been improved, especially now that you can mount a radiator at the top. Overall, I think the case has a really sleek design. I think it looks good. My highest GPU temp was 74 degrees Celsius. For gaming, that's perfect. You shouldn't run into any issues with this case while you're gaming. This does not fit. Hello?
Hey, I forgot the name of the litter that we get.
Just get one that's low dust and it clumps. And scented. All right, where was I? So overall verdict, if you're comparing it to the old 510 case, the airflow has definitely improved. You have that fan that's under the GPU to cool your GPU better. You have room to mount a water cooler radiator at the top versus just at the front that blows hot air in your case. Now, if you wanted to save some money, I would just go with the Flow case. The Flow case doesn't come with the RGB fans in the front, but it does have an open design in the front to allow more airflow. So it's still a really good case. I would definitely recommend that one. Now, this is a very good gaming case. You should have zero issues with heat when it comes to gaming. I do recommend putting one fan in the rear just so that you can get an extra exhaust out there. It doesn't come with a fan, so just keep in mind you'll have to buy one. I mainly tested this case for gaming. If you're gonna be using your computer for heavy CPU workloads, like video editing or 3D rendering, you may want to invest in a bigger case. That's why they have the H7 models. The H7 will allow you to use a triple fan radiator if you want the best cooling possible for your CPU. I don't think that takes away from this case. This case was designed for gaming. It was designed to cool your GPU. So if you're gaming, don't let that deter you from buying this case. But yeah, that's what I think about this case. I think it looks good. Some people may not, but that's just preference. I do have an i5 13600K. I will be testing this, so I'm going to be benchmarking it. I'm going to be stress testing it. I just want to see how it compares to the i9 12900K that I have in here. I also have a 12600K I compare it to, so I can see how much of an improvement it is. I'm excited to see how this performs. So be on the lookout for this video. I'm going to be posting that after this one. If I can get my hands on a 4080, I'll benchmark it with that GPU. If not, I'll keep using that 3080. The 3080 is still a solid GPU. Looks like my job is done here.